All right, 7:41 right now, and look who is here. Here's our good friend Kim Baer, attorney at law. Time to discuss some things involving litigation and some things, some misconceptions that people might have when it comes to lawsuits and things like that.
Yeah. So I thought I'd talk today about, questions that I get. You meet a lawyer and you say, hey, don't you think litigation's just out of control and they're runaway jury verdicts and people just sue for anything these days?
People are sue happy.
They're sue happy. They're sue happy. They sue over anything. And so often people will bring up the McDonald's hot coffee case.
Of course they will.
And
now remind people of what that is in case they forgot.
Yes. Well, so the McDonald's hot coffee case, the reason why that really, kind of gets people talking is it was a 79-year-old woman, and she went through the drive-thru, bought a cup of coffee. She pulled over to add some cream and sugar, and unfortunately then spilled it all over herself, mostly on her legs. And she sued for her burns, and the jury gave her $2.7 million. And so people say, well, that's an example right there. Spilled coffee, seriously, $2.7 million. So,
well, because when you think coffee, you think hot.
It's going to be hot.
It's going to be hot.
It's going to be hot.
And who hasn't spilled coffee on themselves?
Right.
And you weren't like, oh, better sue somebody.
Better sue somebody.
In case you're wondering why they have those words on the cup, that's the reason they have those words on the cup. Caution, contents hot.
Exactly. So, one of the things that I like to kind of educate people and say, okay, well, that's what you heard about the McDonald's hot coffee case.
Right.
Okay.
But let's really look at the facts. So in this particular case, this woman was 79 years old. She had the hot coffee. She did pull over to add the cream and sugar, and that's when it spilled. What they often don't tell you is that she was in the hospital for 8 days. She had third-degree burns.
What?
She had to have skin grafts on her legs. So when you know that, you kind of start to go, wow, that was a little bit more serious than just a little burn. Her lawyer tried to settle the case right up until trial for $20,000. So what got the jury mad, all right? I mean, that's what you say, well, what happened here? It must have been a runaway jury.
Right.
Even hearing all of that. What got the jury mad was that the coffee you make at home is normally about 135, 140 degrees, So, and we all know you blow on it when you drink it. The coffee at McDonald's was 180 degrees, so it was 40 degrees hotter. McDonald's had over 700 claims of people being scalded by this coffee, and they'd done nothing. So when you know those facts, and the $2.7 million sounds like a lot, the way the jury came up with it was they looked at the coffee sales that McDonald's has every day and how much money they make, and the $2.7 million represents 2 days of coffee sales for McDonald's.
Wow.
So. The other thing that you need to know is that when everything was said and done, and leading into the trial, I think McDonald's was only willing to offer, $800 or $1,000 to settle the case. This woman just wanted 20 grand to pay her medical bills, really.
Which is nothing to McDonald's.
Which is nothing to McDonald's, So, and I love McDonald's, so don't get me wrong. This isn't about bashing McDonald's. This is just trying to explain that when you hear outrageous verdicts, you need to find out what the facts are, because maybe there was a reason for those.
I had no idea she spent that much time in the hospital and had skin grafts.
Yes, skin grafts, yes. And I think she continued to treat for about 2 years after that.
Wow.
So then the other fact that you need to know is that after the trial was done, the trial judge in that case reduced that verdict by 70%. So she did not get $2.7 million. And so that's just an example.
How can they do that?
Well, so the judge always has the authority to reduce the verdict. So the judge sits there and listens to everything that goes on in the trial. And at the end of the trial, the jury renders its verdict.
Right.
And then both sides usually go to the judge and say, fix this, overturn what the jury did, or enforce what the jury did, or give us a new trial. And in that particular case, the judge had listened to everything and said, all right, I do think that she was harmed, but we're going to reduce it. And so he reduced it, I think, to $500,000 or $600,000, if I recall. So you just need to. I mean, that's how our judicial system works.
Wow.
Would that be an appeal, or why? I've never heard of that. Where he's like, hey, that's what they said we're going to do, but I'm going to change it.
Exactly. So it's called you ask for a judgment notwithstanding the verdict. And so it's a motion. It's a very common motion.
I never heard of that part either.
Yeah, and you do it at the trial level. So yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So what did she end up going away with? A couple $100,000?
A couple $100,000 probably after she paid expenses and all of that. And and so when you know those facts, facts, then it doesn't sound, so bad. And so what I like to try and tell people is, our system has safeguards. I mean, so we try to settle cases, the jury hears the facts. A lot of times when you hear these snippets, you don't know everything. And then you have to remember, the judge, at the end of the day, if the judge thinks there's a problem with the verdict, the judge can try to fix it. And then you have appeals on top of that, Jackie.
Okay, all right.
Another hot topic that's in the news right now in Iowa is medical malpractice cases. And I think there's a bill right now that's being debated, it might have been debated yesterday, as to whether or not we need to put caps or limits on medical malpractice damages. And I think the proposal right now in front of the legislature is limiting it to $250,000.
Okay.
So I get lots of questions about that. Is that reasonable? Is it not reasonable? Do we need it? And when I ask, people who are in support of caps or limits, why do you think we need them? And they say, oh, medical malpractice cases are on the rise, and everybody sues, and the verdicts are ridiculous. And so I thought it might be helpful just to educate people about medical malpractice cases in Iowa, because we're not California, we're not New York. We don't have really ridiculous cases.
Well, it sounds like you need to go to the Capitol and
there are people over there.
there.
Yeah, there are people over there, and politicians each, everybody has their different view on what's right and what's wrong. But some of the facts you just can't dispute, and so I thought it was worth at least sharing with the audience today. So the National Center of State Courts, their statistics show that in 2015 in Iowa, there were only 117,000 civil cases that were filed in Iowa.
Okay.
And civil cases are going to include car accidents,
Right.
property damage, all sorts of things. So then the question is, well, how many of those were medical malpractice cases? Out of the 117,000 cases, only 160 of those were medical malpractice cases. So that's about 2%.
very small.
Very, very small. Very, very small. And if you look at the rankings, Iowa ranks 33rd in the nation for the number of medical malpractice cases. I practice in medical malpractice, and I will tell you they're incredibly difficult cases. We have to hire experts. They're expensive, and so I don't file one unless I have an expert who says, "Oh, absolutely, this is a deviation of the standard of care."
Right.
So
Almost if it's a lock.
Yeah, and that's the reason why you don't see that many cases being filed, especially if you compare that with a statistic from Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins did a study that shows that medical errors in hospitals are the third leading cause of death. So you have third leading cause of death and 160 cases filed, really each year.
Right.
So, the question is it really out of control? Is it something that needs to be regulated? And I'm not a politician, and I'm not, an elected official. So that's something they'll have to decide. But I thought it was worthwhile at least sharing some facts today.
Okay, but if somebody does come across
Very
a
interesting.
situation like this, where either one of these type of situations where they need some assistance, you would be able to step in and give them a hand.
Yeah, absolutely. If they don't have a lawyer and they want to give our office a call with a question, we offer free consultations, so they can just give us a call and come on in.
There you go.
And have a cup of coffee. It won't be too hot.
It won't be too hot.
Okay, now, would this apply if I went to a pizza place and I got a fresh pizza, came out of the oven, and I bit it, and it burned the roof of my mouth? Does that apply?
Then the question is how hot should the pizza be? And I mean, is a normal pizza 140 degrees and this thing's 180? And have 700 people burnt their mouth and told Pizza
Then we have
Hut or
something.
Domino's or whoever? Yeah.
All right, we'll talk. Okay, it's 10 minutes before 8 o'clock right now. There's Kim's address right across from Veterans Memorial Auditorium, Community Choice Credit Union, Veterans Memorial Auditorium. Check it out. Really easy to get to. We will be right back. This is CW Iowa Live in West Des Moines.